Hey everybody, I'm Dan Lapel from New Focus Recordings, and really happy to be joined by members of Wavefield and composer colleagues to talk about this great new record debut release for Wavefield Ensemble, Concrete and Void. It's coming out this Friday, and hey everybody, we've got Nick DeMaison, Roberta Michelle, Jen Baker, Greg Chudzik, and Victoria Chia. How's everybody doing?
Yeah, all right.
Excellent.
Sweet.
I like how everybody's hands disappears in their virtual background.
Yeah, we coordinated outfits and virtual backgrounds for this, so
we have a dance later.
So this record's fantastic on many levels, but one of the coolest things about it was the sort of the spontaneous sort of organization of this session that happened in October during the lockdown, and I think for a lot of the people involved, it was the first time getting together with maybe anybody, but certainly with a group that size to make music together after whatever 6 months of COVID. Nick, how did this all come together? Or Roberta, or whoever wants to field it.
Yeah, actually, I'll take it. I was having a coffee with our violist Carrie Frey, and we were joking about possibilities for music making, and I think she actually suggested like maybe we should get together in a parking garage and just play some music and just for the chance to play together at all because it had been so long, and then we did. So we found a parking garage and we found a day, and then very quickly asked the 5 composers involved if they could contribute pieces, and everybody said yes. And we met for 3-4 hours in said parking garage, and I don't think we really had any kind of intention of other than getting together and playing. I don't, there was kind of this like, well, if it sounds like anything, maybe we can do something with it. And then it turned out that actually it sounded awesome. So we used it as part of we used some of the recordings as part of our interview series in December, and then we decided it was worth putting out as an album.
I remember we had this one moment when we first started. We started with Jen's piece, and just to test out the sound of recording, Nick, you asked us all to play a note, and we held this note together, and it was this amazing moment of all like actually making sounds together for the first time in however many months, and it felt so good.
So part of the whole thing was that it needed to be music that could be sort of pulled together like basically on no rehearsal, right? But I actually think that opened up a really fascinating diversity of approaches to non-traditional notation, and it makes it, beyond the sort of pandemic story, which will always be cool, but it also gives the album this other level of depth that I've been interested in as I've gotten to know it better. And maybe we can sort of go into the first piece from that point of view. Jen Baker wrote this first track, Lightsicle Sirens. You want to talk about the score a little bit, or what you had in mind as you were writing it?
Sure. I can't remember when it was that we decided we were going to do this. It must have been a couple of months before we actually met. So I was thinking, okay, write something. People haven't seen each other in a long time. People have been locked up. People are feeling a lot of feelings right now. And we may also not have been playing our instruments for a while. So there were a lot of thoughts going through my mind as I was putting together ideas and inspiration for the piece. And one day just kind of crossed my mind, I really get inspiration from words that evoke sounds to me. So in this case, before I even came up with something to write, the name of the piece came up one day, and I sat down and I wrote it down, and I said, I'm not totally sure that this is the piece for Wavefield, but this is happening. So I sat down with it for a few, maybe like a week or something, a few days, and then really dove in and realized the whole piece in one moment, because it all made a lot of sense after thinking about what all the parts, so the microcosms and how the whole is going to set together. Yeah, that, and it was just really, I think it was really exciting too that Nick thought to ask me, Roberta thought to ask me to write a piece for this setting, and I was really excited about that, and I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it, let's bring it on.
Yeah, it's a great way to start the album because it really just grows out of the lowest note on your trombone, right? Which sort of makes me think of the Grisé piece. Is it is that Partiel or
Les Espaces.
oh, Les Espaces, right?
Well, the whole cycle, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Periode also famously features a very low E on the bass.
Ah, cool. And then the harmonies grow out of the overtone series, like from that low pitch, right?
Yep. Sorry, I just had to interject with the nerd out.
That's why you're here, right?
Yeah, I was wondering that actually with your piece, Jen, like, because that just coincides with the lowest standard note on a double bass, and I was like, oh, she thought about that, but I guess it's also the lowest note on a tenor trombone as well.
It's the lowest.
Well, excluding pedal tones.
Yeah, it's the lowest note on before you get to the pedal tones, and also if it's not an F attachment instrument, it's a 7th position note, so it looks very low.
Right.
I look at it.
It's really important for trombonists, to like have the full extension.
Especially for an audio album.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got it, Roberta. Sometimes I don't think about how demented my choices are for the trombone player, and this might have been one of them, because it's a 3-minute long 7th position note that's not very comfortable. But the idea is that it's growing from that, right? And yeah, right, Greg. Also for the bass, that it's just kind of growing out of that. It's starting from the depths, from the bottom.
Yeah, it's sort of this primordial, expansive introduction. And so we also now have like a release event version of this for a smaller forces, which is very cool to sort of get to know the two of them side by side, and hopefully folks who are checking out this, we're going to play the release event version now, but hopefully when you go back and you immerse yourself in the album, you will have a chance to sort of compare and contrast and see how malleable this piece is. Do you want to play that now and talk about it later, or?
Yeah, great. Let's jump to the version we recorded this weekend with just a subset of the group. And yeah, like you said, I think it's a great way to compare and contrast some like open score compositional thinking. Yeah, so let's roll that now.
Beautiful. So that was Jen Baker's Lightsicle Sirens, but in the COVID album release event version, as opposed to the COVID recording session version. It's slightly different. And so that again, as I said, it was a really beautiful and sort of welcoming, expansive way to open the album, I think. And it really feels like it invites you into the musical space, but also in a sense into this, you can sort of imagine people playing in a northern New Jersey garage, not to be named. So the second track on the record is from Jesse Cox. The title is Space Travel from Someplace Else. And anybody want to do a little bit of a setup for the nature of the score and the notation for this? Pretty cool, multi-layered reinterpretation of some of Jesse's work.
Sure, yeah. So Space Travel from Someplace Else is sort of a remix from his piece Space Travel from Home. So he created a TV series where he was performing during COVID from home. And then this piece, we all had to watch a video score individually and make our own individual scores, transcribe the video in whatever way we were going to. And then there are some directions about how many instruments approximately should play at what time and the duration. But apart from that, it's our own transcription and our own listening to each other as we play. So it's an interesting way of doing a score and playing with other people, but also responding to something that has already been created.
Yeah, I felt it. Oh, go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say another an interesting facet of this that I've just recently been thinking about a little bit more now is the dynamic dimension that you have when you're interpreting something off of a video. This is a case where the score is a live document, not a live document, but a document that is not fixed in time. It's not a fixed media. It's something that just keeps on going, and so your job is to interpret that that dynamic element of media, which I think is something that we're going to see more and more of. Just as the technology is more readily available to just have that at your disposal on your music stand. So I think that's a unique element about it as well.
Yeah, and there were a couple of different parts of the video. So there was Jesse playing percussion, and there was that to listen to, and it was also a very visual performance. And then we had these images that Jesse projected of different space, planetary or stars or other things happening behind him that would change as the music would change and the different cues happened in the music. So there were sort of visual things and audio things as well as physical performance things to respond to.
And I think right now maybe is scrolling past a link to his original Space Travel from Home video, if anyone wants. Not now, because we're having an event, but after the event, if you could check out the original, he has a whole series of these videos that he made last spring that are all super interesting. And I would just throw in that because Jesse's a drummer, he has this kind of like expanded drum set that he uses to make his music. And so I think already in the idea of this expanded drum set is this layering of voices that lends itself to the kind of ensemble interpretation that we were able to bring to it, right? There's already this kind of really wide palette of timbres and modes of expression that he's employing when he makes these things, and it becomes kind of like this many people within Jesse making music that then gets exploded out to like the many people of the ensemble remaking Jesse.
I think that was especially interesting for our percussionist who had to also recreate what instruments does he choose, right? What does he pick? And does he go with instruments that Jesse used or change things and adjust based on that? And I think he made some interesting decisions there.
Yeah, I think Jesse used the word remix in the score, right, a couple times. And that's a very cool sort of way to think about this almost telephone game of notation sort of getting reinterpreted through. And the idea that we really weren't coordinating with anybody else in the ensemble in terms of how we were interpreting how to make these sounds on our own instruments. it was there was a lot of food for thought there in terms of the 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 communicative process of notation itself and how it sort of can be tweaked a little bit. And
But yeah,
also,
but isn't
oh, go ahead, sorry.
isn't like any time that we like read a score just an interpretation?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
it's just kind of like taking that to its logical conclusion almost.
It's making it a little bit more explicit, I guess.
Yeah, that this is an interpretation.
Yeah.
This piece also really struck me as a sociological experience with the way that we were interpreting his score became a collaborative measure for us individualistically, and then how we were hearing other people. We were going to always be informed. I mean, I think as musicians we're always informed when we're hearing other people and we're performing with them, so we're reacting also to what we're hearing, so we make so many choices collaboratively in the moment that are based entirely on how he's chosen to work with us in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was that was an interesting phenomenon to experience.
Yeah, it also sort of threw this sort of COVID world into the mix of being live, right? Because we're so used to, over the past year, the musical experiences that we had would be working with people, rehearsing online or teaching online or having other experiences where we're responding to screens, right? So we had that element of it, but we also had this element of actually getting to play and be with each other. So it was a weird mashup of those two different worlds.
And we have a release event version of this one too, which is cool. And one of the things that I found listening through to that was that as opposed to this sort of chorus of distinct individual voices, I think that characterizes the track on the album, the version you guys did, I think because there are fewer instruments, it really actually felt like I could track like this sort of multi-headed hybrid monster a little bit. It felt like you were able to respond to each other a little bit more than maybe we were when it was whatever 12, 13 people.
Yeah, I mean, also the acoustic in the parking garage, while being kind of like nicely resonant, it's really hard to listen. You know, when you have your own instrument next to your head, it's really hard to hear across the circle. And I think in the space the other day, it lended itself to a more chamber interpretation of the piece. I think there was more direct interaction, just possible, because it's just not as there's just like less volume of sound coming at your face.
Sure. So should we take a listen to this new version? So this is Jesse Cox's Space Travel from Someplace Else. Sweet. So yeah, I think if after watching this, you saunter over the album and check out the version of Jesse's piece on the actual release, you'll hear it's quite different. But maybe there's a sensibility that you'll hear some links there. So the next piece on the album is Tories, and it's the title is "A Wasp, Some Wax, An Outline of the Valley Over Us Afall." I feel like if you don't get to have that cool of a title without getting asked to explain what it's about.
No, that was in her rider. She's not allowed to talk about it.
Oh.
She'll have to kill us.
No, it's fine. I mean, because I had a little freak out when the recording session happened about this. So it was called For Wavefield. But there's a sort of a story because it was. So I wrote this piece and a companion piece the same week, and it was like a super stressful week. The companion piece is for non-event, and it exists on YouTube. So it's not really like a release version since it's for a different organization, but there's an alternate version that does exist. That's just sine tones. So that's sine tones in video. And that's just called like for non-event basically. So this was like an orchestration of those sine tones, but obviously like I couldn't map the exact frequencies onto the instruments, nor did I want to. It was just really part of like my process of figuring out pitches and like, relationships and stuff, and then letting the relationships change once it became orchestrated. So that's like one kind of piece of the title and like its being.
Cool. And I mean, when I think about the album as a whole, I think I sort of group your piece and Jen's piece in the sort of the same world, but actually, like notationally, they're really, really different. You want to talk about the score a little bit in this one?
Sure. I didn't get to see the scores of. That was good. I didn't get to see your score, Jen. So was yours open like instrumentation? Like what is?
Yes, it was divided by high, medium, and low sounding instrument.
Sick.
So you self-select what you are, and there was sort of intentional ambiguity. So if you're kind of medium high or medium low, you had choice, and and it was a time-based piece.
Cool. Yeah. So I think we like connected on the stopwatch part. And I guess not really so much in the range because my piece was fully notated in like the way that I normally do. I just wrote it really fast, I guess. And like it wouldn't have worked if it wasn't, for Wavefield, since we've worked together on, this is the third piece now, and like, I haven't worked with everyone who was there in the garage, but enough of people that like, what I mean, and I know you know what I mean and stuff like that. And I am really sorry, Jen, for that really long note. I think that like that's something that definitely in person it's easier to explain. Like really, you can breathe. You can just breathe. It's like fine. So, sorry, what?
It's water under the bridge.
I'll make it up to you somehow, But so the score is notated more or less traditionally, but with time codes. So you play with stopwatch rather than timer, with pitches that are specifically written for specific instruments. It's like a note and then like a duration. I do say specifically in my performance notes that performers are allowed to rest their arm. They're allowed to take a breath, just sort of exit and enter as, sort of unobtrusively as possible. And that becomes part of your piece. And the idea is that you stagger your entrances and exits. So it comes like sort of a kaleidoscope of like things happening, and you read the whole as opposed to the details of any particular sound moment.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that's interesting for me is to think about. So it's like this dramatic irony thing. Like if you know what the scores look like, you have information into the piece that somebody who is just listening doesn't, right? And what does a score like Jen's allow for that a score like Tories doesn't, and vice versa? And what do the two facilitate? So like for instance, I think in your piece, Tori, there's that moment in the middle when it's just trombone and flute, right? And it's this sort of stark interval for. I mean, that could happen in Jen's piece, but the chances that it would happen over and over again, multiple performances, are probably pretty slim. So in your piece, Tori, that takes on like a sort of like structural importance that that characterizes like what the piece is, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think I wasn't really thinking about reshaping the ensemble dynamics beyond this thing that I've been doing for several pieces now, which is this like breathe when you have to, take a break if you have to, that kind of thing, like extended duration kind of thing. Whereas it sounds like thinking about ensemble collaboration and creating structural moments in a piece, that's a different kind of approach and like conceptual approach to like how you co-create the piece as you play it. I think at least where I'm coming from right now is that the co-creation comes from more like the, interpersonal and like reactions or interactions, like I say something, you nod, or, you take a breath and I wait and let you say something, that kind of sort of relationship, which is different. I think it's just different things that one is focusing on. Yeah.
Can I throw something out, or can I throw out a question? I think composers all have like a handful of things that they're sort of obsessed with over time, that sort of like keep springing up in their lives and in their creative impulse. And I had the joy of speaking with Eno Pope by way of Yarnwire a few weeks ago with their interview series, and he has this like this concept about like denting nature, and I was like, Eno, tell me about denting nature. And he was like, we don't have time, that's too big of a conversation. And I was like, yeah, but that's the important conversation. Like that's the conversation that's going to like unlock all of your thinking for us. And Tori, I might be like off base here, but when we were at Evelock, and I feel like this is a conversation that we should have like in a park with like substances. But you use the phrase, because I've literally been thinking about this for a year and a half, or almost 2 years. You used the phrase, and it was like in the middle of a rehearsal, you just like threw this out, and I was like, whoa. But you used the phrase, the sensuality of harmony, and how we never talk about the sensuality of harmony. And I've literally been thinking about this for 2 years. And I wonder if like that idea is one of these sort of driving forces within your compositional life, and if in like the next 4 minutes you can unpack that for us.
Well, thanks. I actually like don't remember this moment.
That's amazing. That's even better. Even better.
Well, I think it's definitely too. Oh, by the way, I really liked your interview with Eno Pope, the first one. I haven't seen the second one, but the first one was awesome. I think that it is important to me, and like I think the more that I try and think about it in the ways that I've been trained or like educated into thinking about what harmony is, the worse it gets for me. So it just has to show up in like unexpected moments, and I'm just gonna have to let it take its time and figure out exactly what this means. But I do think it is actually very important, because I think that, I remember I was like talking to like my high school boyfriend, like in high school, and I was like trying to explain something about how like I never, like most of the time I don't like think to myself in words about stuff. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, okay, and it was fine. It was an interesting insight to like the way both of our minds worked. But I think that like I often won't like articulate a thought before it hits the words, but I will have to take a second to let the thought sort of settle. But if I had to explain what that moment was and what those thoughts were, I couldn't do it, but I need that moment before I can put the thoughts into words. Maybe that's a thing everybody does. I don't know, not in your heads. But it's definitely a thing that I think carries over to how I approach experience and moments, and therefore also harmony and like time through harmony and through material. As you all know, I bartended a karaoke bar. Something that has like a strange phenomenon that has happened is that sometimes I won't even notice like what I'm listening to, even though it's extremely loud. I'm just sort of focused on like taking the orders, all the people and the conversations and stuff. And sometimes like my attention will come in and out over like, oh, did that song go on? Did we put on that person's song? And like, do I have to switch over to cue after this person's song? But it's like a marker, and it's sort of like an intellectual marker that somehow like snaps some sort of instinctual thing. But I think back to your question, Nick, it's like something to do with the length of time spent in this like soup, for example, the karaoke soup, or let's say extended duration like pieces. I do really like longer form pieces, and things that take their time to sort of like evolve, that aren't so narrative or event based, which I also like. It's just I choose not to do that per se right now. I think trying to explore and understand how, like, existing in those moments for that amount of time and what that does to my intellectual and physical and sensual like being in a particular moment is something I'm interested in understanding as a person, and that's something I'm interested in understanding in music through writing. So, if that kind of answers the question.
No, good answer. Yeah, and it makes me think that we should have like long form, like non-narrative extended karaoke as a thing.
Okay.
How would that go over at the karaoke bar?
I mean, it's okay. But yes, definitely like a longer conversation over substances in a park.
We'll do that.
So let's listen. And if you have substances that you can partake in while this track plays, by all means, do your thing. So this is A Wasp, Some Wax, An Outline of the Valley Over Us, A Fall. So the next track on the record is Greg Chudzik's Silo, and this is for strings with Max Patch, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Can you tell us about what's Max doing?
Max is hanging out in the background. Max isn't really interacting necessarily with anything that's going on. In other words, it's semi-fixed. It's not getting the live. It's not doing anything with what the performers are doing in that moment. Rather, it's just playing samples. But it's playing pre-recorded samples in the exact same process and method that the musicians are performing those same samples. And it's interesting to me, having done that with a Max Patch, I just realized that I could literally achieve the exact same result if I just recorded renditions of people playing it and then they play another rendition over it. In other words, it's not necessary to involve any live computation, which just brings up a very interesting point. Then why do it? And I think, like, Nick, you were talking earlier about like what like composers are obsessed with certain things, and I think my obsession right now is just sort of relegating any musical choice that I deem arbitrary to the computer. And I think I do that because I'm fascinated by the idea that each performance can be different and unique. It's sort of like the NFT of fixed media, where like each thing can be its own unique thing and it will never be like that ever again.
Wait. So you're saying that we should have sold your track for like $500,000 to fund the next 2 seasons of Wavefield?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think I'm just I'm really into that idea that even though you theoretically could just have it as a fixed thing and then it's a tape. I like the idea of like an interactive tape, not interactive tape, but a dynamic tape that will be different. Because again, it doesn't interact with anything the performers are doing.
And you wrote it originally to be played inside an actual silo, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously that's a little restrictive, right? Because you need to find an abandoned grain silo.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, well, there's certain places. There's a great one outside of Buffalo, New York. The one that I particularly recorded it in was in Ghent, New York, which is on the other side of the state.
Do you want to have audience in the silo?
It depends how big the silo.
Audiences in silos are great.
Sometimes those silos are huge, but they do sound like incredible. Like if you play a note inside a silo, the cylindrical nature of the thing, both going this way and the dome at the top, which is like a 3-dimensional sphere, makes these just incredibly long reverb tails. I mean, it's incredible. It's amazing.
I have a silo. Did you know that?
You have a silo. Wow.
Yeah, and Jen, you have an album that you made in it, right?
Yeah, I have a long piece.
Oh man, this is
recorded.
Jen, why are we not having this event in your silo?
I couldn't get a train ticket to Michigan fast enough.
Oh, it's in Michigan. You didn't say it's in Michigan.
I mean, I can't keep it in a New York apartment.
So we'll have to write a grant to get us all to Michigan. Yeah.
One at a time, maybe?
But I guess I was inspired by that reverb because I was just playing a bunch of like harmonics on the bass in this silo and just hearing them interact in a way in real time, because I mean the thing lasts for so long after you're done playing the note. I just thought it was really interesting, and it was really interesting sort of listening to the chance sort of just intoned relationships between the notes that would occur. Sort of like accidental things that are outside of the spectrum of equal temperament. And so that's where I had the idea to make it with harmonics, because it really explores these accidental relationships that can occur when you sort of, wander off, as it were, with these like sort of like non-equal temperaments. So I thought it was really cool to experiment with that.
Great. So we also have a unique release event version of this, but it's just with you.
Yeah.
It's austere.
Yeah. Well, and again, because I'm the one that's controlling the parameters of the Maximus P patch. There's no reason why I couldn't just have 3 different versions of myself, or actually 4 on this, 4 different versions of myself, just being spontaneously generated, all being spontaneously generated in a different way to sort of create this interesting overlap. So that's what I did. And I will say that there is a sort of like Marxist time efficiency exploitation where I don't have to record them 4 times over because I let the computer do that work.
But doesn't that just mean you're like automating people out of jobs?
Yeah, I'm automating myself out of a job, basically.
Well, I don't know what to say about that.
I'm the only person to blame.
Yeah, well, Wavefield and New Focus Recordings do not endorse this approach, just for the record. But we'll enjoy listening to it nonetheless, and also encourage you to listen to the album version, which is beautiful in its own right. So let's check it out. It's Greg Chudzik's Silo. Great. So that was the release event version of Greg Chudzik Silo. But let's actually get a taste of what it's like on the album, fleshed out with strings and sort of ringing in the glory of this unnamed northern New Jersey parking garage. Great. So the final track on the album, last but not least, is Nick DeMaison's Untitled one for Wavefield. And I found this track really fascinating. So you wrote that you did some location recordings in some other places, not New York, and then did spectrographic renderings of them, which, I read that and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's awesome. And I understand it. And then I think a little bit more about it. I'm like, wait, hold on. Like, so how did that manifest itself from this spectrographic rendering into a score? And what was that process of, again, sort of reinterpretation in these layers of almost like a telephone game of taking sound and then bringing it all the way to a final thing?
Yeah, I think I share that interest with Jesse. Maybe that reinterpretation of a reinterpretation. Yeah, so I mean, as a good student of the students of EarCam, I've kind of always been fascinated by our ability to look inside sounds and to use that observation to devise a new way of thinking about sound. But in my own practice, that's always meant actually looking at a sound and then renotating what I see. And kind of like Jen was saying, that this had to be performable essentially without rehearsal, and also had to be composed on fairly short notice. It seemed like maybe I just sort of was like, well, maybe I should just give people the image as a prompt and see what they do with it. And so that's what happened. I sort of created this pastiche. I started by creating the pastiche of the sound sources in a way that I was happy with how those sounds sounded together, and then created the spectrographic rendering of that, and then basically drew some parameters over top of it to help guide the musicians, and then gave that to them to render. It turns out that part of it is sitting right here. So the album cover, at Greg's suggestion, the album cover is taken from a small section of the score, and it's sort of like, I guess, like I'm not sure what I did to it. Reimagined the score as album art. So, visual oral retranslation. Because it turns out sounds are really beautiful. Turns out sound is beautiful, even when you look at it. And, like we're all used to seeing these kinds of things, and it prompts people into interesting ways of interacting.
Yeah. Well, I feel like maybe let's listen first and talk later for this one. How about that?
Sounds good.
you just heard an excerpt from Nick DeMaison's Untitled one for Wavefield, and let's throw this back to the players on the session. Jen, Greg, Roberta, any memories or comments about the experience of playing Nick's score, or for that matter, like any of the scores that we did that day?
Well, when I look at a score like this, I think to myself immediately, this is going to be as infinitely easy or difficult as I make it for myself. And I'm continuously, as I'm experiencing that, continuously adjusting, focusing, finding a new focus, readjusting. And so sometimes I'm doing something really, really hard and then decide, try this. And then it turns out something it's very, very simple. And then, so I'm finding myself adjusting and readjusting continuously throughout. And I don't know how others are doing it, but it does kind of force the performer into a either a conscious or an unconscious decision-making program.
Yeah, I know for my part too, it's very interesting to interpret something that is spanning across the entire harmonic spectrum, just because you have a choice to make. Am I going to have this represent the entire range of my instrument, or have this represent just like where I can fit in this one thing? And I think for me, my answer was to just sort of like really think about how the instrument that I'm playing fits into this like spectrum, and sort of selectively choose to only play during that part. And also, it was really interesting to just think about just like volume levels, as it relates to amplitude. I mean, it's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but I mean, this, I guess, could be interpreted as like a Fourier transform. And so, it's just like showing different energy levels at different parts on the frequency spectrum. And then if you think about the sound that your instrument makes, it also has a lot of different energy levels, at certain points, which define its tone, like within that frequency spectrum, if you're just playing one note. And so I guess I'm really going towards the complicated end of the spectrum as opposed to the simple end of the spectrum, just trying to think about, how the timbral makeup of the notes that I'm playing actually like fits into this already complex tapestry.
I sort of found myself fighting against my nature as a flutist to just read the top always of the score. So trying to figure out where I could fit in, again, using the timbre of my instrument and how that fits into the ensemble, but not necessarily just writing on top. It was interesting trying to make different choices in there as we went through.
Yeah, I mean that's all super interesting. I mean, I sort of feel like the job of all composers these days is to devise something that creates a successful dramaturgy of sound. And so, like, regardless of how you coax the players into listening and interacting and performing, like there has to be a successful dramaturgy of action, right? And so if your interest is harmonic interest, then your job is to devise a dramaturgy of harmonic interest. And if your interest is I don't know, rhythmic interest, then your job is to devise a successful dramaturgy of rhythmic interest. But if your interest is coaxing people into creating that dramaturgy on the spot, that's a different it's a different way of thinking about what you put in front of performers. And yeah, I think like this way of notating was really about that. It was, how do you, like, given limited time and given limited preparation, how do you coax people into a convincing dramaturgy visually on short notice, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I think actually, like, all of the pieces on this album did a really remarkable job at conveying information to the performers so quickly. Right? It was all in extremely different notation styles, and I've looked at other music of yours before, Jen, and had to have deeper conversations about it. And same thing, Tori, I've played your music before, but this felt like, okay, I open the score and I know what to do in a way that is not always so apparent. So I was very impressed by that.
And also that it ended up sort of generating really pretty diverse results, I think, sonically, given the restrictions, and diverse, but also like well balanced, throughout the album. I think there are pieces that speak to each other and complement each other, and then there's contrast. And so maybe we just need another pandemic and sort of for the next project to sort of have everything.
No.
That's dark, Dan.
That was
too soon.
No more
Much
ideas
too
from you,
soon.
Dan.
Get out of this one first. But yeah, this was great. So thanks everybody for chatting. Really nice to see everybody. And for those of you out in internet land, this is Wavefield's Concrete and Void. It's FCR 304. You can find it on all the various exploitative and non-exploitative platforms that we distribute music through. And we encourage you to spend some time with it and get to know it. It's a really cool album. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.